You said it out loud, didn't you? Jackson froze, the heat rushing to his ears as the fluorescent lights above buzzed, unforgiving. The door to the glass-walled conference room clicked shut behind him, muffling the rest of the office. Camille stood near the whiteboard, arms folded, eyes sharp like broken glass. What are you talking about? Jackson managed, his voice flat, hollow. She stepped closer, heels clicking on the polished floor. You told Nate about the prototype. Her words weren't a question. They were a sentence, a verdict. I didn't mean to, he began, but stopped himself. That sounded like guilt. You didn't mean to? Camille echoed, incredulous. Do you have any idea what you've done? Outside the glass, co-workers drifted past, unbothered. Phones rang. Laptops clicked. It was just another Monday at Grafton Tech in Austin, but inside the room it felt like the air had thickened. He remembered the moment too clearly. Lunch with Nate last Friday, joking over barbecue and sweet tea. The words had come out easily, too easily. We're testing a speech-mapped cognitive layer, basically a framework that shifts based on what you say to yourself. At the time it had felt harmless, cool even. Now his stomach turned. I thought Nate was cleared, Jackson said weakly. He's not, Camille snapped. And he's not just not cleared, he's greedy. He took your cool idea and walked straight into exec briefing this morning like he invented the damn thing. Jackson blinked. What? Oh yeah, Camille nodded, bitter. He pitched our framework like he'd been building it from scratch. Got Cheryl all excited. They're calling it Mindspeak now. And guess who's getting a fast track to the Zurich summit? He looked down at his hands. I didn't think. That's the problem. You didn't think. You spoke. Silence stretched between them, filled with the low hum of HVAC and the muffled world outside. You ever read Rupert Sheldrake? She asked suddenly. Jackson looked up, confused. What? Sheldrake. Morphic resonance, language shaping reality, all that fringe science. Camille's voice softened, a cold calm taking over. It's not just theory anymore, Jackson. What we say, what we declare isn't harmless, especially not here. He knew she wasn't just talking about science now. She meant culture, power, office politics, the invisible cage. You need to fix this, she said, turning toward the whiteboard. Because if you think losing credit is bad, wait until your name disappears from the project entirely. Nate's already rewriting the story. I'll talk to Cheryl, Jackson said too quickly. Camille paused. No, you'll prove to Cheryl the framework doesn't run without your core logic. Quietly. Before Nate erases you for good. He swallowed hard. Outside, Nate laughed with someone near the espresso machine, soundless behind the glass. And Jackson finally understood. It wasn't just what you built. It was what you said about it, and when, and to whom. Jackson sat at his desk, hands still, screen glowing with lines of code that no longer made sense. He heard voices around him, keyboards clicking, someone complaining about cold brew, a Spotify playlist humming low, but everything felt distant. He couldn't stop replaying Camille's words. You spoke. How had 3 casual sentences over brisket turned into sabotage? The irony wasn't lost on him. He'd spent the last year building a system around the power of internal language, how the way you talk to yourself affects how your mind behaves. He believed in it, lived by it, even programmed by it. Now his own words had turned on him. He opened the project files. The system's backbone, the recursive cognitive model, was still his. A unique architecture that allowed the AI to shift its behavior depending on the user's spoken affirmations or doubts. Adaptive cognition. No one else in the department even fully understood it yet, except maybe Camille. His phone buzzed, a Slack message. Camille, coffee, 10 minutes, roof. He grabbed his notebook, stuffed it under his arm and took the stairs. The elevator felt too vulnerable, too slow. The roof was quiet. Austin skyline in full view, sun sharp over the city, the wind tugging at his sleeves. Camille stood by the ledge, sipping something that looked like jet fuel in a cardboard cup. You look like you just watched your house burn down, she said, not turning. I might have, Jackson said. She exhaled. You're not the first person who forgot that words are weapons in this place. He stepped beside her. "It's worse than that. Words build the place." Camille smiled faintly. "Now you're catching up." They stood in silence for a moment, watching traffic far below. "I still have access," Jackson said finally, "to the kernel module Nate doesn't understand. If I switch out the adaptive layer for a legacy shell, the whole thing will run flat. Predictable, robotic." Camille turned to him slowly. "They'll notice." "Exactly. Cheryl will ask questions." She nodded. "You have a window, 48 hours tops, before Nate pulls you out of version control entirely." Jackson's chest tightened. "He's already doing that?" "He's naming his new branch Mindspeak 2.0. Don't play dumb." He swallowed hard. "I didn't know it was this bad." Camille looked at him, expression unreadable. "Jackson, listen. This company doesn't fire you. It forgets you. It changes the narrative until you stop existing." Something cold settled into his spine. He turned toward the stairwell, heart pounding. "Hey," she called after him. "From now on, only say what you're ready to have used against you. That includes yourself." He nodded slowly. He didn't know exactly how it had gotten this far, but he knew one thing. He couldn't trust words anymore, not even his own. By midnight, the office was silent except for the quiet hum of servers and the occasional groan of the building settling into the night. Jackson sat alone, lit by the dull blue light of his monitor. Everyone else had gone home hours ago, but he couldn't. Not until he made the change. He scrolled through layers of code that only he and Camille really understood. Nate might have stolen the pitch, but the structure beneath it was more than a theory. It was art. And Jackson knew exactly which thread to pull to unravel it, without breaking it entirely. He hovered over the module. Conscious shift, core, his fingerprint, his voice. One change. Just one. Enough to prove to Cheryl that Mindspeak wasn't Nate's creation. He modified a key behavior node, swapping out the dynamic processing layer with a frozen fallback. It would still run, but the system wouldn't adapt anymore. No emotional mimicry, no real-time shifts based on user language. It would feel off, predictable, static. He hit save, heart pounding like a fist in his chest. Then he hesitated. What if Nate checked the logs? What if he already had someone monitoring for internal commits? Jackson pulled up the audit log. For the first time in weeks, he noticed something strange. Timestamps that didn't match, code pushes with his credentials. At times he wasn't logged in. He opened the most recent one, a quiet insertion deep in the back end. Chown JF approved this, per Thursday sync, except he hadn't. He'd never seen this file, never touched it. "Jesus Christ," he whispered. Someone had been ghostwriting code under his name. He ran a trace. IP matched his desk, of course it did. Nate sat across from him, had access when Jackson left for meetings, for coffee, for the bathroom. His stomach turned. This wasn't just about stealing an idea. Nate had been building a paper trail, making it look like Jackson was involved, or worse, complicit. He shut the terminal quickly and disconnected from the repo. Then he opened a blank notebook and started scribbling by hand. It felt old school, but right now, analog was safer. He diagrammed the logic structure, annotated proof of authorship, his original flowcharts, timestamps, even sticky notes he'd saved from early brainstorming with Camille. He'd need every scrap of it if things went sideways. And they were already leaning that way. Behind him, the elevator dinged. Jackson froze. Footsteps echoed down the hallway, slow, steady, confident. He shut his laptop, grabbed the notebook, and stepped into the dark supply closet next to the server room. Cramped, hot, silent. He held his breath as the footsteps passed and kept walking, then paused. The closet was soundproofed, but Jackson swore he could feel whoever it was standing just outside, waiting. After a long moment, the steps continued down the hall. He didn't move. Not yet. Not until he knew who was behind the mask. The next morning, Jackson showed up to the office early, before even the cleaning crew had finished restocking the break room. He didn't go to his desk. Instead, he took the stairs 2 floors down to Camille's lab. It wasn't really a lab, just a converted corner space with blackout blinds and sound panels she'd installed herself. But it felt safer than anywhere else in the building. She was already there, cross-legged on the floor, laptop open, earphones in. He tapped the doorframe. Camille looked up, eyes alert. "You look like hell." "Someone's committing code under my name," he said flatly. That got her attention. She pulled out one earbud. "Show me." He stepped inside, closed the door, and laid out the notebook. His own paper breadcrumbs, dates, module IDs, original logic trees. Then he opened his laptop and brought up the audit logs, the commit history, and the most recent fake push. Camille whistled low. "That's not just theft, that's a setup." "I know." She stared at the screen, tapping one thumbnail against her teeth. "Nate's good, too good. This isn't just ego, this is calculated. He's rewriting the narrative before anyone even knows it changed. And when it's too late," she said, "you'll be gone, voluntarily or otherwise." Jackson rubbed his eyes. "I need to get to Cheryl before he does." Camille shook her head. "You go in now, she'll think it's just office politics, a turf war. Nate's got momentum. You've got a notebook and bags under your eyes." He sat back, frustrated. "Then what?" "You need leverage, irrefutable, and not just code." "She'll glaze over the technicals." Camille walked to her whiteboard, wiped it clean with her sleeve, and began sketching fast. A timeline, bullet points, a map of key meetings, voice logs, feature additions, all aligning with Jackson's original work. Then she paused. "What if you let mind speak fail?" He looked at her. "What?" "If you already poisoned the core module, then let it demo live. Let Cheryl see it falter, then you bring this." She gestured at the board. "The real blueprint." Jackson hesitated. "They could blame me for the failure. Unless you can prove you were shut out, marginalized, that Nate isolated you." He nodded slowly. "The story has to be emotional, personal." Camille looked him dead in the eye. "It has to be true." For a moment, they both went quiet. The hum of the AC, the faint traffic outside. Then she asked, "Why do you think Nate targeted you?" Jackson's jaw tightened. "Because I believe the system works. Not just the tech, but the idea. That what we say matters. That it shapes us." Camille stepped closer. "And that scares people." He met her gaze. "Not as much as being erased does." She nodded once. "Then let's give them a story they can't ignore." The lights in the demo auditorium buzzed overhead as Jackson sat in the second row, notebook in hand, pulse drumming in his ears. The team was gathering for the quarterly innovation showcase, an internal pitch event where execs evaluated the most promising tech. Cheryl was already seated at the back, flanked by 2 directors and a new VP from Zurich. Jackson wasn't on the program, not officially, but Mindspeak was. On stage, Nate wore his charm like a tailored suit, clean, confident, rehearsed to the syllable. His slide deck flickered behind him, bright and glossy. Language as interface, Mindspeak, and the rise of internal UX. Jackson stared at the screen, jaw tight. Every concept was his. Every term pulled from the late-night notes he used to scribble after hours. Nate gestured smoothly as he spoke. "The user doesn't just control the system with commands, they influence it through self-perception. Speak confidence, the system adapts. Speak doubt, and it hesitates. It's about making the machine reflect the mind's intent." Scattered nods, quiet admiration. Jackson's throat was dry. He turned the notebook over in his lap, fingers brushing the edge of the last page where Camille had drawn a circle the night before, and labeled it Truth. Nate moved toward the podium. "And for the first time, we've created a model that can listen, not just to words, but to patterns of thought. Because what you say and how you say it reveals who you are." He tapped a tablet. The screen behind him shifted to a live demo feed. "Meet Sarah." An AI avatar appeared, neutral face, professional tone. A mock interview scenario began, the AI responding to voice cues in real time. At first, it worked. Then Sarah began repeating answers, then contradicting them, then freezing. The room stiffened. Jackson leaned forward, silent. Nate fumbled. "Looks like we're experiencing some unexpected load balancing. Just give it a second." But Sarah didn't recover. She stammered, then looped, then displayed a hard-coded fallback response. "I'm sorry, I didn't understand that. Please rephrase." Twice. 3 times. A few chuckles from the crowd. Someone coughed. Nate's smile cracked at the edges. Jackson waited exactly 7 seconds, then stood up. Maybe she's confused because someone stripped out her adaptive core and replaced it with a static shell. Every head turned. Cheryl blinked. Jackson stepped forward. Mindspeak doesn't work without recursive feedback modeling. The part of the system that listens wasn't Nate's, it was mine, and it was removed last night. Nate stared at him, stunned. Jackson opened the notebook, held up a printed diagram. Original timestamps, version history, handwriting. Camille, standing in the back, added, "We can prove the changes and the fraud." Cheryl narrowed her eyes. Nate's voice broke the silence. "This is completely unprofessional," but his voice cracked. Jackson looked at him steady. "You built a lie with stolen words." The code just told the truth. The aftermath was quiet, too quiet. Cheryl hadn't said much after the demo, just that she would review everything and speak with legal. Her voice was cool, unreadable, the kind of neutrality that didn't give away where the axe might fall. Jackson sat alone on the rooftop terrace later that evening, the city lights of Austin flickering below him like embers. A warm wind tugged at his shirt. The notebook lay open beside him, pages rippling, almost like they were breathing. He hadn't gone back to his desk. Nate had disappeared from the building before Jackson even left the auditorium. Camille had slipped him a quiet nod before vanishing into the stairwell. Now he was left with the waiting, and the wait. He stared out over the skyline. The startup next door was having a rooftop mixer, music drifting faintly up, full of laughter. A different world entirely. A world that hadn't watched itself collapse in a glass-walled auditorium that morning. His phone buzzed. Camille. "Still standing?" He typed back, barely. A pause. "Camille, you did what you had to. Doesn't mean it won't hurt." He didn't respond right away. She was right. He had exposed the truth, but part of him still felt fractured, hollow. Not just because Nate had tried to erase him, but because, in a way, it had almost worked. Jackson had started to doubt his own voice, to believe maybe he had said too much, trusted too easily, spoken carelessly. Words that built a cage, words that handed someone else the key. Now he wondered, how many other stories had been rewritten in that building? How many names erased in silence over coffee, in side meetings where the real decisions were made? And what would it cost him to stay? The terrace door opened behind him. Cheryl. She walked over and stood next to the railing, hands in the pockets of a dark blazer. "Nice view," she said. He didn't answer. She glanced at him. Legal confirmed the commits were forged, and Camille's timeline was thorough. Still, he said nothing. "You're not fired," she added. Jackson raised an eyebrow. "That's generous." "No," Cheryl said quietly. "It's strategic." He looked at her now. "You built something people didn't understand," she said. "That made it dangerous. Especially when someone else could explain it more confidently, even if they didn't know what the hell they were talking about." Jackson gave a dry laugh. "Story always wins." Cheryl nodded. "But now it's your turn to write it, if you want it." He paused. "And Nate?" She looked out toward the skyline. "Gone." Just like that. Jackson nodded slowly, then asked, "Do you believe it?" "That word shape reality?" Cheryl smiled faintly. "I've been in this business 20 years. Words are all anyone remembers." She turned to leave, and this time, Jackson stayed seated, watching the city breathe, knowing the real story was just beginning. 2 weeks later, Jackson walked into the same conference room where everything had unraveled. Same glass walls, same fluorescent buzz, same whiteboard smudges in the corners. But today something felt different. He wasn't here to defend himself. He was here to present. Camille was already inside, laptop open, marker in hand. She glanced up and gave a nod. No words needed. The project had been renamed. Mindspeak was dead. The rebrand was quiet, internal. No press release. Just a new repo and a silent update in the company tracker. Reflective Interface Protocol, Alpha Preview. Not catchy, but honest. And this time, Jackson had final commit access. He plugged in his laptop and brought up the interface. The demo loaded smoothly, the system booting with a new audio layer, one that paused before responding, registering not just what the user said, but how. He clicked a test phrase. "I'm not sure I'm good enough to do this." The AI paused, then responded, "Doubt is natural. Let's walk through it together." Not a command, not a correction, a reflection. Camille smiled, just a little. "It listens better now." Jackson nodded. "Because we stopped trying to make it talk smarter and focused on how it absorbs meaning." He looked down at the code, his words. His logic, rewritten, not erased. Across the room, Cheryl entered quietly. No suit jacket today, just a grey t-shirt and jeans. She grabbed a seat in the corner, nodded once. "Impress me." Jackson didn't move to the podium. He sat down and started talking about how the project began in a scribbled notebook, about how language isn't neutral, it's architecture. That every phrase builds something inside us, and machines can only reflect the clarity or confusion we feed them. He didn't talk about Nate. He didn't need to. The point wasn't vengeance, it was authorship. Halfway through the demo, Camille projected the new voice protocol logs. Transparent, annotated, sourced, everything traceable. Cheryl nodded slowly as she watched. "I want this ready for Zurich," she said, "with your name on it." Jackson didn't smile, not yet. Instead, he just asked, "You think they're ready to hear what this really does?" Cheryl stood, tucking her hair behind her ear. "Doesn't matter if they're ready. What matters is we say it clearly." She left without waiting for approval. Camille turned to Jackson. "You okay?" He leaned back in the chair. "Not sure yet." She closed her laptop. "We built a system that reflects people back to themselves. No wonder everyone's scared of it." Jackson stared at the glass walls, his own reflection faint and flickering. "I used to think words were tools," he said. "Now I know they're doors." Camille didn't reply. She didn't have to. Outside the room, the office moved on, unaware, unchanged. But inside, something had shifted, and this time Jackson would be the one writing the next line.